My name is Maris Calder. I am 60 years old. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was balancing invoices for a small law firm downtown. My phone buzzed against the desk, and when I saw Ethan's name, I smiled before I could help it. He doesn't call much any more texts. Quick updates. The occasional love you, mom. But that day, his voice carried the tone people use when they are rehearsing something. Mom, Ava wants to meet you. We're doing dinner at her place Friday night, he said. And before I could answer, he added, just don't make it awkward. Okay, I could hear laughter behind him, the kind that doesn't wait for permission. I said yes, because mothers do. He thanked me, said he'd send the address, and hung up before I could ask what awkward meant. For the rest of the afternoon, I worked slower than usual. Numbers lined up neatly, but my focus drifted. Ethan had never sounded cautious around me before. I told myself it was nothing that he was nervous, that young men tried too hard when they cared, but the quiet under my ribs felt heavier than logic could explain. Friday came with humid Raleigh air, thick and golden. I stopped by a small wine shop on Glenwood Avenue, asking the clerk for something appropriate for dinner. He handed me a bottle with a label I didn't recognize and said, "This one's elegant, but not loud." I smiled. I knew the feeling. Driving through the early evening traffic, I rehearsed conversation topics the way people rehearse apologies. The last time I had dinner with Ethan, we ate takeout on my porch, and he told me about a new job at a tech firm. I had wanted to ask questions, but he'd kept glancing at his phone, smiling at messages from someone he wouldn't name. Now I knew who she was. Ava. Her house sat on a quiet street north of downtown, all glass and pale wood, glowing from the inside like it had its own weather. Through the wide windows, I saw people moving easily, wine glasses catching the light. I turned off the engine and sat for a moment, letting the sound of my own breath fill the car. I'd spent most of my adult life making other people comfortable with budgets, with order, with reassurance. Comfort had become my native language. Still, my fingers trembled slightly as I lifted the bottle from the passenger seat. When I rang the bell, Ava opened the door herself. She was beautiful in the curated way of someone who knew how to use light long hair, perfect lipstick, the scent of something expensive and citrus. "You must be Ethan's mom," she said warmly, though her eyes were already glancing behind me, checking the street. Inside, the air hummed with conversation. Ethan stood near the table, laughing with a tall couple who must have been Ava's parents. He looked so grown new suit, confident posture, but when he saw me, a flicker of guilt crossed his face. "Mom, you made it," he said, hugging me quickly. "Everyone, this is my mom, Maris." Ava's mother smiled. Her father nodded politely. The table gleamed with candles and plates too white to touch. Someone poured me a drink I didn't ask for. As I sat down, Ava turned to the group, her voice light and practiced. "We were just talking about work. Everyone here's in finance somehow. It's practically a family trade." I felt Ethan's knee bump mine under the table, a small, silent warning. And before I could answer, Ava smiled and said, "So, Maris, what do you do?" The laughter that followed came too easily, like a wave already gathering speed. Ava's dining room looked like something from a design magazine, too perfect to touch, too bright to feel warm. The table stretched longer than it needed to, filled with dishes that belonged in a photo, not a meal. The air smelled faintly of rosemary and something sweet. Ava's father, Gregory, raised his glass to new beginnings. He said, his tone carried the smooth authority of someone used to leading board meetings. Ava's mother, Elaine, nodded, her diamonds catching the light as if they, too, were listening. Ethan smiled beside me. The careful kind of smile you give a boss. Not your mother. I tried to hide the small ache it caused. So, Maris, Elaine began, her voice polite and curious. Ethan tells us you've worked in finance for most of my life. I said, I'm a forensic accountant now. I work independently. Ava tilted her head, wine glass resting elegantly between her fingers. Forensic accountant, she repeated, like it was a riddle she might solve. That sounds intense. What exactly do you do? I track inconsistencies in financial reports. I explained. Fraud detection, embezzlement, internal audits mostly for mid-size firms. Ava grinned. So, spreadsheets and crime scenes. The line hung there, glimmering with mockery. Her father chuckled first, then her mother, then after a pause, Ethan. The laughter rippled down the table. Polite and effortless. Practiced. I kept my eyes on my plate, cutting the roasted chicken into smaller and smaller pieces until the knife trembled in my hand. Ava reached over and gave Ethan's arm a playful nudge. You never told me your mom was a detective. That's kind of adorable. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, smiling too hard. She's good at what she does, he said, but his voice didn't sound like pride. It sounded like deflection. Gregory leaned forward. So, you work from home, then must be nice. Setting your own schedule. It's quiet work, I said softly. Not glamorous, but steady. Elaine sipped her wine. There's value in that. She said, Of course. Ava's work keeps her on her toes. Venture capital isn't for the faint of heart. Ava flashed a smile. We're reviewing a few startups right now. Honestly, I can't imagine spending my days combing through other people's mistakes. It must be exhausting. Her tone was sugar with a hint of blade. Ethan shifted in his seat. Ava, he murmured, but she only waved him off. Oh, come on, she said lightly. I'm just teasing. Maris, you know how it is. We all need a little humor at the table. Right? I set my fork down. The sound of metal against porcelain was sharp. Louder than it should have been, the laughter stopped as if someone had flicked off a switch. I met Ava's eyes. Humor depends on who's laughing, I said. Elaine cleared her throat. Gregory reached for his wine, pretending to admire the vintage. Ethan's knee brushed mine under the table. A nervous warning. Ava blinked once, then smiled again, smaller this time. Measured. You're right, she said. Maybe I should watch my timing. The conversation limped forward. Gregory started talking about his years in investment banking, how markets were finally stabilizing. Ethan joined in, eager to move on. Ava's laughter returned, lighter, like nothing had happened. I kept quiet. My plate cooled in front of me, the food untouched. Their words blurred into a steady rhythm of success and self-assurance. Ava turned to me again. You know, we're actually looking at a few analytics startups right now. Brilliant tech, but the founders are a little lost when it comes to the business side. Maybe you'd find it interesting. Maybe, I said. My voice didn't rise or fall. She leaned closer, her perfume sharp and floral. They build these algorithms for tracking financial patterns. Fascinating. But most of them don't even understand what they've made. The name of one company drifted from her lips just casually enough to sound like nothing. But it caught in my chest like a held breath. Clearsight Analytics. Ethan laughed again, oblivious. Mom, you'd love that kind of thing. I looked at him, then at Ava. Her smile didn't waver. Under the table, my hands folded neatly in my lap, hiding the tremor that had begun in my fingers. Ava twirled her wine glass, the pale liquid catching the light. We're finalizing a deal soon, she said. Her voice smooth and casual, but loud enough to pull every ear back to her. A small analytics startup out of North Carolina. It's nothing impressive yet, but the tech is promising. My firm plans to buy it for practically nothing and rebuild it properly. Gregory nodded. You've got a good eye, Ava. Find them early. Buy them cheap, that's the game. Elaine smiled with quiet admiration. Our daughter has always known potential when she sees it. Ethan's grin widened. She's sharp, he said proudly. Ava doesn't miss much. Ava laughed softly, basking in the praise. I try, she said, then added. The company's called ClearSight Analytics, a small team run by some middle-aged accountant who apparently thinks she's an engineer. The fork slipped from my hand and clinked against the plate. No one seemed to notice. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out their laughter. I looked at her. Her confidence, her carelessness, the certainty that she was untouchable. Be careful which companies you underestimate, I said quietly. Ava turned, eyebrows lifting. Oh, Gregory chuckled. Sounds like you know something we don't. Maris. Ethan shifted in his chair. Mom, he murmured, his voice tight. Ava leaned forward, amused. You think we're wrong about it, I think, I said slowly. Sometimes value hides where arrogance doesn't look. Her smile sharpened. That sounds like a proverb. You must be fun at audits. The table chuckled again, softer this time, waiting for me to react. I didn't. Ethan exhaled loudly. Mom, please, he whispered, low but clear enough for the table to hear. Don't make the family look bad. The words hit harder than I expected, not because they were cruel, but because they sounded rehearsed, like something he'd practiced saying. I looked at him, my son in his crisp suit, his hair styled the way I used to comb it when he was 10, before I stopped reminding him to visit. His expression was pleading, embarrassed. Ava gave a sympathetic smile that wasn't sympathy at all. He's protective, she said lightly. That's sweet. Elaine reached for a dish of roasted potatoes, pretending not to notice the tension. Try these, Maris. They're lovely. I nodded. Taking one I didn't taste, Ava went on as if nothing had happened. Anyway, ClearSight will be a great acquisition once we restructure it. The founder doesn't seem to understand what she's built. Happens all the time. Some people just reach their limit. I felt something settle in me stillness. Precise and cold, Gregory laughed. Well, that's the beauty of business. One person's confusion is another person's profit. Ava clinked her glass against his. Exactly. Ethan looked down at his plate, avoiding my eyes. His silence was worse than any insult. I placed my napkin beside my dish and straightened my posture. Excuse me, I said quietly. Rising from the table, Ava blinked. Are you all right? I'm fine, I said. I just remembered something I need to check on. Gregory offered a polite nod, dismissing me already. Ethan half rose, uncertain whether to follow. He didn't. I walked toward the hallway, feeling the low hum of their conversation start again behind me. Laughter returned, softer, but steady, like nothing had cracked at all. In the reflection of a framed mirror near the door, I caught my own face calm, expressionless. Inside, a storm I couldn't yet name had already begun. The night air pressed thick against the windshield, heavy with Carolina humidity and the faint scent of pine. Streetlights slipped across the hood like fragments of thought. I drove with both hands steady on the wheel, but my mind ran far ahead of the car. Their laughter still echoed faintly in my ears, Ava's sharp, effortless tone, Ethan's uneasy chuckle following hers. It wasn't cruelty. Not exactly. It was dismissal. And somehow that was worse. I turned onto Glenwood Avenue. The city thinning into long stretches of road. My reflection trembled in the glass, tired, invisible, but alive in a way I hadn't been for years. The silence of the car felt cleaner than the noise I'd just left behind. I remembered the first year after David died. Ethan was in college, trying to keep his grades up while pretending not to worry about me. I would come home from the office, heat up soup from a can, and sit at the small desk by the window. One night I downloaded an open-source analytics program just to fix a bug that irritated me. I ended up rewriting half of it before sunrise. That was the start. It became my ritual long nights. Lamplight, and the sound of crickets outside. Code, test, erase, rebuild. I stopped keeping track of time or grief. Clearsight was born out of both. I wanted something that couldn't die suddenly, something that worked no matter who walked away. The name came from a line David once said when he was alive. "You always see what people miss." Maris. He'd been teasing me about balancing a checkbook. I still heard that voice when the algorithm finally detected its first fraudulent trail, flagging discrepancies faster than any software I'd ever used. When the first licensing offer came in $200,000 from a mid-level firm in Charlotte, I turned it down. I wanted full control, not a payout. Back then, I told myself it was about pride. Tonight, I realized it had been about protection. Ethan never knew. He saw me working late, assumed I was balancing accounts for clients. He didn't ask, and I didn't explain. I told myself it was better that way. He had his own life. I didn't want him to think I was chasing relevance. The headlights of another car swept over me, bright and brief. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. Ava's voice echoed again, a middle-aged accountant who thinks she's an engineer. The arrogance of it burned through me. But underneath the anger was something smaller and older disappointment. At a red light, I caught my reflection again, creased eyes, tired mouth. The kind of face people stopped listening to once they'd decided they knew your story. When the light changed, I drove on. The roads narrowed. The neighborhoods grew familiar. My porch light waited up ahead, a small, steady glow against the dark. I pulled into the driveway, cut the engine, and sat still. The air conditioner ticked as it cooled. Somewhere beyond the quiet, a cicada called. I thought about the company I had built, the life I had hidden, and the son who no longer knew where his mother ended and his embarrassment began. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel and breathed, the way I used to before long nights of work. Then I lifted my head and reached for my bag. It was time to turn the light back on. The sun hadn't cleared the trees when my phone began to buzz on the nightstand. I reached for it half asleep, expecting a reminder from a client. Instead, Ethan's name glowed on the screen. "Mom." Ava felt humiliated. "Please apologize," I read it twice, the words blurring slightly. There was no greeting, no question about how I was feeling, just a request for repair, neatly phrased and sent before breakfast. A second message arrived before I could put the phone down. No hard feelings. "Maris, it was just a joke." Ava, a joke. I sat at the edge of the bed, the morning light dull and gray against the curtains. My throat felt tight, but I forced myself to breathe evenly. For a while, I stared at the two messages side by side. Neither asked what had really happened. Neither mentioned the name that had stopped my heart at dinner Clearsight Analytics. They only wanted the noise to stop, for me to step back into the quiet space I was meant to occupy. I typed out a response, then erased it. The house was still, the air faintly smelling of coffee grounds from last night. On the table sat the laptop I had left open, the glow of its screen fading in standby. Forensic accounting was supposed to be invisible work accuracy without applause. I had built a company around that invisibility, one careful equation after another. It had made me secure, maybe even respected, but never seen. Ethan called an hour later. His voice was tight with frustration. "Mom, you embarrassed her. She was trying to make conversation. She mocked me." I said, "That's not conversation." He sighed. "She didn't mean it like that." You take things too seriously sometimes. Do I? A pause stretched between us. Look, he said finally, Ava's family is important in my industry. I just need you to smooth things over, okay? You want me to apologize for telling the truth. I want you to make this easier, he said quietly. When the call ended, I stared at the black screen of the phone. My reflection looked back small, distorted, and tired. At my desk, I opened my notebook and wrote a single line under the heading, Audit Trail. No one asked if it was true. The handwriting looked unfamiliar, too deliberate, like someone trying not to shake. I closed the notebook, sat in silence, and let the phone buzz again without answering. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I sat at the kitchen table, the same place where I used to help Ethan with his math homework when he was 10. Back then, he would sigh and tap his pencil while I explained long division. His mind always reaching for something bigger, something faster. He had been the kind of child people noticed right away, bright, easy to like. Everyone loved Ethan. They always had. His teachers called him gifted. My parents called him the golden one. When he was little, I would beam with pride. But as he grew, that praise turned into a wall I couldn't reach over. Every story I told at family gatherings turned into a footnote after his. Every quiet thing I built was overshadowed by his light. I became the balance steady, reliable, invisible. Now, years later, I could still hear my mother's voice at the last Christmas we'd spent together. Ethan's such a natural leader. And Maris, you keep everything running. It was meant as a compliment. It had felt like a dismissal. After the dinner with Ava's family, that old imbalance returned with brutal clarity. Ethan was the golden child again polished, applauded, and I, as always, was the shadow. I opened my laptop. The glow lit the kitchen in pale blue. I logged into ClearSight's administrative dashboard, a habit that had once comforted me. The system's design was simple rows of clean data, the quiet logic of my creation. I scrolled through user logs, tracing familiar IP addresses, clients, internal testers, server checks. Then I stopped. 3 unauthorized access attempts blinked on the screen, each from the same corporate IP. The timestamp placed them days before the dinner. My breath slowed. I clicked for more detail, the digits lining up in my mind like a confession waiting to be read aloud. The IP belonged to a venture capital firm, one headquartered in Charlotte. Ava's firm. For a long moment, I didn't move. I watched the cursor blink in the search bar. Steady and patient, as if it knew I would keep looking. I expanded the report. Each attempt had targeted the demo environment, an older sandbox version of ClearSight I'd once sent out for limited testing. Whoever it was, they hadn't just tried to log in. They'd tried to download the prototype. My stomach tightened. I traced the path, mapping the digital trail. The attempt had failed, my security layers held, but they had tried multiple times. They weren't curious. They were digging. I leaned back in my chair, hands trembling slightly. Of course she'd known the name. Of course she'd spoken it at the dinner table with that easy confidence. She hadn't stumbled upon it, she'd already seen it. I reached for my phone, then stopped. Calling Ethan wouldn't help. He'd defend her again, the way he always did, the way people protect the ones who dazzle them. I thought of the pattern, how it always worked. The golden ones were believed, forgiven, excused. The quiet ones were questioned, forgotten, or asked to apologize. It had been that way all my life. But this time, the numbers told a different story. I opened another tab and began to trace the IP through a verification tool, copying the network address to confirm its origin. My heartbeat steadied with every click. This was what I knew: facts, timestamps, data that didn't waver under charm. By the time I finished, I had a folder of evidence access logs, security alerts, verification reports. It was enough to prove the breach, or at least the intent. I saved everything to an encrypted drive and labeled the file Ledger Pattern. The name came to me without thought. It felt right. When I finally closed the laptop, the house had grown darker. The porch light outside flickered once. Catching the edge of the window pane, my anger had cooled into something sharper, more deliberate. I no longer felt like the scapegoat they expected. I felt like the auditor who had just opened the right file. I called Lionel the next morning before I could talk myself out of it. He answered on the second ring, his voice brisk but kind. "Maris Calder," he said. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you again. Still keeping all the good data to yourself?" His tone loosened something in me. I hadn't spoken to him in almost a year, not since I stopped teaching part-time at North Carolina State University. Lionel had always been my sounding board, the one person who treated my late-night coding as real work. Not a hobby for a lonely widow. "I think someone's been inside my demo," I said. He was silent for a moment. Then, inside as in stolen, or inside as in sloppy firewall management, I'm not sure yet. But I've traced 3 failed access attempts from a corporate IP. The company belongs to a venture capital firm in Charlotte, Ava Lynn's firm. He gave a low whistle. "The dinner girl." "Yes," I said. I knew she was trouble the second you mentioned her voice in that tone. He muttered, "Send me your logs." By afternoon, we were sitting side by side in his office on campus, the space cluttered with cables and mismatched monitors. He scrolled through the security report I'd exported. The glow from the screen reflected in his glasses. "Here," he said, tapping the timeline. "See this string? That's an active query, not a passive crawl. They weren't just browsing, they were scraping your code, trying to duplicate the algorithm." I said. He nodded. "They hit your sandbox 3 times. Failed. Then tried from a different subnet. Smart enough to pivot. Dumb enough to leave fingerprints." I folded my arms. "So it's intentional." "Absolutely." I leaned closer, reading the timestamps. Each attempt had happened late at night, about a week apart, long before that dinner. Ava hadn't been curious about ClearSight. She'd already known it existed. Lionel glanced at me. "You could press charges now. Digital intrusion, attempted theft. You've got the logs, the IP match, everything." "I'm not ready for that," I said quietly. He frowned. "Why not? They'll bury it if you wait too long." "I don't want revenge, Lionel. I want the truth on record." He studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. What's your plan?" "I want to build a marker," I said. "A watermark that ties every unauthorized action directly back to their network. Something subtle. If they try again, I want their digital signature burned into my code." A small grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. "That's the Maris I remember, polite, but lethal." I ignored the comment. "Can you help me design it? Of course. But if you do this, you're inviting a second attempt." "I know," I said, "and I'm counting on it." He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "What are you really after? Maris vindication or a confession?" "Clarity," I said. "I want to see what kind of person she is when she thinks no one's watching." He didn't argue after that. Together, we built the watermark, a line of code so faint it looked like a comment left by a careless developer. But when accessed without authorization, it would log every trace of the user's device network ID, location, and user credentials. Nothing invasive, nothing illegal, just proof. It took us most of the day. When we were done, Lionel saved the file to my encrypted drive and looked at me over the top of his glasses. "You know," he said, "most people would have stormed into their office with this already. Most people haven't spent 60 years learning when to stay quiet," I said. He chuckled softly. "Fair enough. So what now? I'll send them one more demo," I said. "A perfect trap, disguised as another opportunity." Lionel stood, stretching his back. Just promise me you'll call a lawyer if this goes south. I promise. I packed up my laptop, feeling an unfamiliar steadiness settle into my chest. As I left his office, the evening light hit the glass doors of the building, and for a moment I saw my reflection in them calm, certain, prepared. This wasn't anger anymore. It was arithmetic. They had written their version of the story. Now, I was writing mine. The envelope arrived on a Thursday, thick and cream-colored, with my name written in perfect, looping script. There was no return address, but I didn't need one. The paper smelled faintly of perfume Ava's kind. Something citrus and expensive. Inside, the card gleamed with embossed lettering. You are cordially invited to celebrate the engagement of Ethan Calder and Ava Lynn. No note, no message, no phone call to follow. Just ceremony disguised as civility. I sat at the kitchen table, the late morning light spilling across the tile. My laptop was still open beside me, ClearSight's dashboard glowing quietly on the screen. The same alert blinked from the corner, an unauthorized login attempt. Blocked, but logged. Another one. I placed the invitation on the table, next to my coffee mug. Coffee. The contrast made me smile. Linen paper beside cold ceramic. One pretending to be Grace, the other unbothered by it. The phone rang. Ethan's name flashed on the screen. Mom, he said, too cheerful. You got the invitation. Right, I did. Good. Ava worked hard on those. She wanted something timeless. It's beautiful. I said, very formal. He hesitated. We wanted to keep it classy. The party's at the country club, next Saturday, 7 sharp. Of course, I said, I'll be there. A silence stretched between us. I heard the faint clatter of dishes in the background. Ava. Maybe. Setting the stage even for phone calls. Ethan spoke again, quieter now. Look, Mom, about that dinner. Ava didn't mean to offend you, Dee. She jokes like that sometimes. I know what she meant. I said, she's under pressure. Her firm's closing a big deal, and people talk. I just need everything to go smoothly that night. Okay, no tension. Please, I wouldn't dream of it. He sighed, relief flooding his voice. Thanks, Mom. It'll mean a lot to us if you're there. When the call ended, I picked up the card again. The gold letters caught the light. Ethan Calder and Ava Lynn. I turned back to my laptop. The cursor blinked steadily in the middle of the screen, waiting for my next command. So this is the stage, I whispered. I opened the folder labeled Ledger Pattern. Inside were my compiled logs, the digital fingerprints that tied every breach to Ava's firm. I scrolled through them, each timestamp a quiet truth they hadn't noticed yet. I selected the newest file and added one more layer of code, a small, silent tracer, buried deep within the next demo I planned to send. Let them come. This time, every step they took would leave a mark. I started the morning like any other coffee, silence, and the steady glow of my laptop screen. But I wasn't working for a client. Today, the audit was personal. The ClearSight's dashboard opened to rows of data, every log time-stamped and clean. I had already traced the last intrusion back to Ava's firm, but something told me to dig deeper. Numbers never lie, they just wait for someone to look closely enough. I began combing through my files, one folder at a time, until I reached an archived directory labeled External Review Materials. It held copies of demo data I had once shared with a handful of venture firms. My eyes stopped on one subfolder, Ledger Charlotte VC. I hadn't touched it since the day I sent it out. When I opened it, the screen filled with a series of PowerPoint files. The first slide appeared with a familiar structure. Only the title was different. Financial Pattern Recognition, Engine V2.0. by Ava Lynn and Associates. I stared at the screen. The formatting was identical to my own pitch deck down to the order of the sections, the fonts, the graphs. But where my name had once been, theirs sat proudly in gold lettering. I clicked through the slides slowly. My equations were there, my variables, my design logic, even my color-coded tags. They hadn't rewritten anything. They had simply renamed it. A quiet sound left my throat, something between disbelief and laughter. You can't fake math. Not mine. I copied the file to a secure folder, then opened another. It was worse. Ava's team had presented the material as their own innovation, complete with a corporate timeline that placed development months before ClearSight's launch. The deceit was meticulous, but not intelligent. The metadata still carried my author tags, my initials MC, repeated in every slide's code layer. My fingers steadied on the keyboard. The more I uncovered, the calmer I felt. It was a strange, cold calm, the kind that comes when something you've known all along finally steps into the light. By noon, I had gathered everything: slides, metadata, network traces. Together, they formed a perfect sequence of proof. I drafted an email to my attorney, Thomas Leary, a man I'd worked with before when ClearSight first filed its patents. Thomas, please review the attached materials. Unauthorized use of proprietary algorithms by a venture firm based in Charlotte, connected to Lynn Ventures. I'll need confirmation of next legal steps. No contact from my side until advised. M. Calder. I read the email twice, attached the files, and hit send. Then I sat back, breathing slowly. The sound of the refrigerator filled the silence. 15 minutes later, the phone rang. Thomas didn't waste time on greetings. Maris, I'm looking at this deck right now. These are your formulas. Yes, I said. Every one of them. He paused. Do you want to pursue this quietly or publicly? Quietly, I said, for now. Then I'll prepare the notice of inquiry. But you should know if they've already shown this material to investors, we'll need to act fast. I understand. He hesitated. Do you want me to contact your son? No. The silence between us stretched. Professional, but heavy. Finally, Thomas said, you've done everything right. You documented it all. I always do. When the call ended, I closed the laptop and stared at the reflection of my face in the dark screen. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel angry. I felt steady. The way I used to feel before signing off a perfect audit report when every number added up and every lie finally lost its balance. I reached for my notebook and wrote one line beneath the header. Evidence summary: integrity doesn't shout. It waits for the math to catch up. Then I turned off the light. The numbers would keep speaking long after I was done. He showed up on a Sunday afternoon, unannounced. The sound of his car door shutting crisp against the quiet street. I watched from the kitchen window as he stood in the driveway for a few seconds, adjusting his jacket like he was rehearsing. When he knocked, I called out, "It's open!" Ethan stepped inside, holding a nervous kind of smile. "Hey." "Mom." "Hey," I said. "You look tired." He laughed softly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Busy week." "Coffee?" I asked. He nodded. "Please." I poured 2 mugs, sliding one across the table. He sat down but didn't meet my eyes. The silence stretched long enough for the clock on the wall to fill it. He took a sip, then said carefully, "Ava told me she sent you the invitation. I received it." I said, "Very elegant." He exhaled, relief flickering in his voice. "Good. She spent a lot of time on those. She wants everything perfect." I stirred my coffee. She usually gets what she wants. His shoulders tensed. "Mom, please don't start." "I didn't," he sighed, shaking his head. "Look, I came because I don't want things to be weird next weekend. Ava's nervous. She thinks you might, Well, you know, say something. I let out a quiet breath. Say something. He nodded quickly. Yeah. Like what happened at dinner. She just wants to avoid another embarrassment. I finished for him. Ethan winced. That's not what I meant. It's what you meant, I said gently. You just didn't want to say it out loud. He looked down at his coffee. Both hands wrapped around the cup. You know I love you. Right, I do. I'm just trying to keep the peace. I understand, I said. That's a hard job. He glanced up then, surprised. So you'll come and just let it be a good night. I'll come, I said. And it will be a good night. His face softened, relief washing over him. Thank you. Really, Mom. It means a lot. I reached across the table, resting my hand on his. You don't have to thank me. I won't make trouble, Ethan. He smiled, a little unsure. Good. Ava's been under pressure lately. Her firm's about to close a major deal. She's trying to keep her head above water. She always lands on her feet. I said. He hesitated. You don't like her. I don't know her. I said, not really. But I know how she treats people she doesn't think matter. Ethan frowned. You're reading into things. I didn't answer. He looked away again, staring out the window as if searching for the right words. I just want both of you to get along, he said finally. I want that too, I said, and I promise you, I won't make a scene. He looked at me then, confused by the calm in my tone. I smiled softly, taking a slow sip of coffee. Don't worry. Ethan, I'll behave. He seemed satisfied with that. When he stood to leave, I walked him to the door. He kissed my cheek and said, Thanks, Mom, you're the best. I watched him drive away, the sound of the engine fading down the street. Back inside, I set the 2 mugs in the sink. The one he drank from still held the faint print of his thumb. I touched it once before rinsing it away. I hadn't lied to him. I wouldn't make a scene. Scenes end. Statements last. The country club glimmered like it had been polished just for her. Chandeliers spilled warm light across the marble floor. A string quartet floated through the chatter, and every guest seemed to orbit around Ava Lynn. I stood near the back of the ballroom, glass of club soda in hand, watching her laugh with a small cluster of investors. She looked perfect in the way expensive things always do, sparkle without warmth. Ethan hovered beside her, proud and nervous at the same time, adjusting his cufflinks between introductions. When he spotted me, his shoulders dropped in visible relief. He crossed the room quickly. Mom, you came, he said, leaning in for a quick hug. Of course, I said. I wouldn't miss it. You look great, he said, and he meant it kindly, though his tone carried the faint surprise of someone who hadn't expected it. I clean up, I said. He smiled awkwardly. Ava will be glad. She was worried you'd still be upset. Upset, I asked. About dinner? Oh, I sipped my drink. That was weeks ago. I'm past it. He looked relieved again. Good. Let's just keep tonight simple, okay? No tension. Simple, I said. Got it. Ava approached before he could say more, glowing under the chandeliers. Maris, she said, air kissing my cheek. I'm so glad you made it. Doesn't it look amazing? Ethan wanted understated, but I told him, no. You only get one engagement party. It's beautiful. I said. She smiled brightly. Thank you. We've both worked so hard to get here. Her hand rested on Ethan's arm, possessive but elegant. He looked at her the way young men look at something they think they earned. An event coordinator tapped a spoon against a glass. Everyone, she said, if we could have your attention. A few words from the happy couple. The crowd turned. Ava squeezed Ethan's hand and gave him the microphone first. He cleared his throat, his smile tightening under the attention. I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here tonight. He began, Ava and I are so lucky. She's brilliant, honestly. I've never met anyone who works as hard as she does. Her firm is about to close a major acquisition. She has such vision, real business vision. Applause scattered politely. Ava tilted her head, feigning modesty. Ethan continued, his voice warming with pride. "And I'm especially glad my mom's here tonight," he said. Turning toward me, "She taught me what discipline looks like. I guess tonight she gets to see what real success looks like too." A ripple of laughter passed through the room. Light, polite, rehearsed. My son smiled, not unkindly, but with the confidence of someone who didn't understand what he'd just said. I raised my glass, hiding the tremor in my hand. The bubbles caught the light like tiny sparks. When the laughter faded, Ava stepped forward. "Thank you, Ethan," she said, taking the microphone. "And thank you all for celebrating with us. This year has been such an incredible journey professionally, personally." Her voice glided over every word, smooth and practiced. She didn't notice me stepping closer to the stage. I caught her eye and smiled. She smiled back, uncertain. When she paused to breathe, I lifted my glass slightly. "If I may," I said. The quartet stopped playing, heads turned. The event coordinator looked startled, but said nothing. Ethan blinked. "Mom, maybe later, it'll be brief," I said. My tone was calm, not loud, but it carried just a few words for the couple. Ava hesitated, then forced another gracious smile. "Of course," she said. "Please." The microphone changed hands. It was heavier than I expected, cool against my fingers. I faced the crowd, the gold of the chandeliers reflecting in their glasses, and felt every nerve settle into place. I wasn't shaking, I wasn't angry, I was ready. The microphone felt heavier now, though maybe that was just the weight of what I had carried for weeks. Ethan's nervous laugh still hung in the air, trying to fill the space I had taken. I smiled at him gently before turning toward Ava. "You were right," I said, my voice steady. "My work is dull. Endless nights reviewing spreadsheets, cross-checking reports, and sometimes when the numbers don't add up, security footage." A soft murmur rippled through the crowd. Ava blinked, still smiling, though the corners of her mouth had begun to twitch. Ethan frowned. "Mom, what are you doing?" "Sharing something educational," I said, setting my glass on the table beside me. "After all, this is a celebration of partnership, isn't it?" I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. From the back of the room, someone chuckled nervously, as if unsure whether to expect a joke or a speech. "I brought a few visuals," I said lightly. "Something simple: numbers, timestamps, patterns. I promise it won't take long." The event coordinator hesitated, but didn't stop me as I connected my phone to the projector cable still dangling from the slideshow setup. The screen behind Ava flickered, the glossy photo of her and Ethan fading to black. Then the numbers appeared, rows of log entries, neatly time-stamped. The first slide showed login attempts, IP addresses, and failed access notes from the ClearSight servers. "This," I said quietly, "is what diligence looks like. Every line represents an attempt by a specific corporate network to access proprietary code from my company. ClearSight Analytics." Ava's expression froze. The color drained slowly from her face. Ethan looked at me, confused. "Your company?" "Yes," I said. "Mine?" Someone near the front whispered. Another voice asked, "What's happening?" I advanced the slide. "And here," I continued, "we have presentation materials from that same firm, files bearing my variables, my formatting, my equations just with new names on them. Ava Lynn and Associates." Ava took a small step forward, forcing a laugh. "Maris, this is a misunderstanding." "I agree," I said. It's very confusing when data speaks for itself. I zoomed in on a highlighted section of the metadata, the author tags reading MC on every slide. You didn't even bother to delete the tags. I said. Ethan's jaw clenched. Ava, he said under his breath, tell me this isn't. She turned toward him, her voice sharp. Ethan, it's nothing. She's twisting something technical. It's all public code anyway. I shook my head. No, it isn't. I can show you the contract dates. The licensing deal signed 6 weeks ago. Every trace of access was logged before your dinner, before your so-called acquisition. I clicked again. The screen filled with a short clip, a recorded internal meeting, voices muffled but clear enough to recognize. Ava's voice cut through, cold and familiar. Just replicate her code. She'll never know. The sound silenced the room, forks stilled, glasses lowered. Ethan's face turned pale. Ava, he whispered. She stammered. That recording could be anyone. It's you, I said. The same pitch deck. The same timestamps. The same firm email headers. You built your empire on someone else's work. Her parents stood frozen, eyes darting between us. Disbelief turning to quiet horror. I unplugged the phone and set it down on the table beside the mic. That's all, I said softly. No one clapped. The quiet felt enormous, heavy with the sound of truth settling in. I looked at Ethan. His hands hung limp at his sides, his mouth slightly open, but without words. Ava was still standing there, her face tight, her breath shallow. I turned back to the crowd, gave a small nod, and said only one thing before walking off the stage. You can't fake math. The sound from the speakers filled every corner of the ballroom. Ava's voice, stripped of charm and polish, came through sharp and clear. Just replicate her code. She'll never know. The words hung in the air like broken glass, then silence, clean, cold, absolute. It wasn't the silence of confusion. It was the silence of understanding. I stood still. My phone still connected to the projector, the light casting a faint glow on my hands. The clip ended with a quiet click. Across the room, Ava froze mid-breath, her expression locked somewhere between disbelief and panic. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Ethan stared at her, then at me, as if the room itself had tilted sideways. What is this? He said, his voice barely more than a whisper. I didn't look at him. My eyes stayed on Ava. That's theft, I said evenly. Not talent. Ava's mouth twitched. You manipulated that, she said quickly. You've been planning this. You must have. No, I interrupted. You planned it. I just watched. Her father stepped forward, his voice brittle. There must be some misunderstanding. Our firm has strict compliance protocols. The access logs are from your firm's network, I said. Your credentials, your timestamps, all verified. There's no misunderstanding, only documentation. Ava's mother turned to her daughter, voice trembling. Ava, tell them this isn't true. Ava shook her head too quickly. It's not. It's being taken out of context. Everyone borrows code. That's how innovation works. Borrowing doesn't come with your voice on record. I said. The crowd began to whisper, a low wave of sound spreading across the room. Investors, family friends, people who had once laughed at her jokes now quietly turned away. Ethan took a step toward me. You recorded her, no, I said softly. She recorded herself. My software logs every unauthorized session. Her firm tripped the safeguard. He blinked, his face pale, processing each word as if it weighed something new. You built all of this? Yes. For how long? 4 years, I said. Alone. He looked at me, then really looked. His expression cracked open, some mixture of awe and shame. I didn't know. You didn't ask. I said, not cruelly, just true. Ava moved suddenly, reaching toward the projector as if yanking the cable could erase the evidence. Turn it off, she snapped. This is private property. You can't just... I stepped back, unplugged the cord myself, and slipped the phone into my pocket. Done. She glared at me, trembling with rage. You think this makes you look powerful? You humiliated my family. You'll regret this. I met her gaze, calm and steady. The numbers were already there. I just stopped pretending not to see them. Behind her, Ethan's voice broke. Ava. She turned to him, desperate. You believe me, don't you? His silence answered her. Someone in the crowd whispered, It's all on record. Another voice followed. She said it herself. Ava's parents stepped away from the center of the room, their practiced smiles dissolving. The air smelled faintly of champagne and tension. I placed the microphone back on the stand. The click echoed louder than I expected. This isn't about embarrassment, I said quietly to no one and everyone. It's about truth. It always adds up, eventually. Then I turned, leaving the hum of whispers behind me. As I walked toward the door, I caught a glimpse of Ethan through the reflection in the glass, his eyes following me, full of something I hadn't seen in years. Recognition, and maybe, finally, respect. When I walked out of the ballroom that night, the air outside was damp and cool, heavy with the scent of rain that hadn't yet fallen. Behind me, the doors shut with a dull thud, muffling the noise of confusion, gasps, and the sharp echo of Ava Lynn's heels as she stormed out after me. I didn't look back. By the next morning, the story had already started spreading quietly at first. Like a rumor no one wanted to repeat, but everyone needed to confirm. I didn't have to make a single call. Truth, I'd learned, has a way of forwarding itself. By Monday, 48 hours later, Ava's firm released a public statement. It was polished, careful, and empty. Pending internal review of professional conduct, it said, but the phrasing was enough. In our world, that line meant suspension. It meant damage control. It meant they had seen what I'd shown them. My phone buzzed constantly that day. Ethan's name flashed again and again. I let it ring. The first time, I was in the kitchen, stirring coffee I didn't drink. The second time, I was sitting by the window, watching the rain finally arrive. The third time, I simply turned the phone over, face down on the table. I knew what he'd say. He'd ask why I had done it there, why I hadn't warned him, why I had to make everything public. He wouldn't understand that I hadn't done it to him. I'd done it for myself. When evening came, the phone went quiet at last. I thought maybe he'd stopped calling. But then it buzzed again, one final time. I answered. Mom, he said, his voice rough. I just need to understand. There's nothing left to explain, I said softly. You humiliated her. She humiliated herself. She says the recording was taken illegally. Then she should sue. I said, tell her I'll see her in court. He hesitated. They've already suspended her. She's losing everything. I looked out the window. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. Then maybe she'll learn what integrity costs, I said. He was quiet for a long time. You've changed, he said finally. No, I said. You're just seeing me now. His breath caught, like he wanted to argue but didn't know how. I didn't mean what I said that night. He whispered, about success, about you. I know. I said, you said what you believed. He sighed. Are you proud of this? Of how it ended? I thought about that. No, I said, but I'm at peace with it. I wanted you there to celebrate, not destroy everything. I didn't destroy anything. Ethan, I revealed what was already broken. There was a soft click, like he was shifting the phone in his hand. I wish you'd told me who you really were. I smiled faintly. I've been the same person all along. You just stopped asking questions. Neither of us spoke for a while. The rain outside had turned into mist, the kind that lingers without sound. "Are you okay?" he asked finally. "Yes," I said, for the first time in a long while. He didn't reply. The silence between us wasn't angry anymore. It was tired, tender, unsure. When the call ended, I stayed by the window. The sky was gray, the kind of gray that carries both ending and renewal. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, older, calmer, unmistakably mine. Somewhere out there, a firm was drafting new contracts. Investors were deleting her name from future deals. And Ava Lynn was learning what it meant to face the math of her own making. The night air drifted through the cracked window, cool against my skin. I breathed it in slowly, the smell of rain and relief mingling together. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just exhales and keeps moving. He came 3 days later. I knew it was him from the sound of the car door, a slower, heavier rhythm than usual. When I opened the door, Ethan was standing there, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Rain still clinging to his hair. He didn't ask to come in. He just stepped inside. Like the words he'd brought wouldn't survive another minute outdoors. "You didn't have to humiliate her," he said. I closed the door behind him. "I didn't," I answered. "She did that herself." He gave a dry laugh. The kind people use when they're trying to hold back anger. That's an easy thing to say after destroying someone's career. "Destroying," I said quietly. "No. Exposing." He turned toward me then, eyes sharp. "You made her a villain in front of everyone we know. You could have talked to her privately, handled it differently." I studied him for a moment. "Would you have believed me?" He hesitated. "That's not the point." "It's exactly the point," I said. "You didn't believe me when she mocked me at dinner. You didn't believe me when I said she was wrong about Clearsight. You only believed her." "That's not fair," he said. "It's true." I said, "And fairness has nothing to do with truth." He looked away, jaw clenched. "You always have to win, don't you? Even now, I don't care about winning." He scoffed. "You could have fooled me." I walked past him into the kitchen and poured a cup of coffee, not offering him one. Ava wasn't some victim of circumstance. "Ethan, she stole something. She tried to profit off the work I built for years. He followed me." Still bristling. "You think that justifies humiliating her in public?" "Yes," I said simply, "because she did it in public. She mocked me there. She lied there. So she answered for it there." He rubbed his face, sighing. "Do you have any idea what this has done to me, to my reputation? People are talking like I was part of it." "My clients." "Your clients," I repeated softly. "You're worried about clients." "I'm worried about my life," he snapped. "You set off a bomb and walked away. You didn't think about what would happen to the rest of us." I stared at him, my voice steady. "You're angry that I told the truth. That's all that happened. The world didn't collapse. Ethan, it just got louder where it used to be quiet." He opened his mouth, then shut it again. The room felt smaller, the silence dense between us. "Finally," he said. "Are you happy now?" After all of this, I looked down at my hands. The faint tremor finally gone. "No," I said softly, "just done pretending." He didn't speak. The quiet stretched, raw and brittle. I could hear the rain tapping against the window again, softer this time, like it was tired of being loud. Ethan's voice broke the silence. "She's leaving town," he said. "I don't know where. Her parents cut her off. Her firm's finished. She blames you." "I'm sure she does." I said, "She's not the only one." "I know," I said again. He stood there, shifting from one foot to the other, a boy in a man's frame, still trying to reconcile both. Then he asked, almost whispering, "Do you even care what happens to her?" I met his eyes. I care that it finally stopped happening to me for the first time. He didn't look angry, just hollow. He nodded once, without really meaning to, and walked to the door. When it closed behind him, I didn't follow. The echo of it lingered for a moment, then faded. I sat down at the kitchen table, the coffee cooling in my hands. The rain outside had slowed to a thin, patient drizzle. The house was quiet again, heavy, familiar, and honest, and I stayed there, listening to the sound of it. The meeting was held in a small conference room in Durham, no marble tables, no chandeliers, just a long wooden desk and the quiet hum of air conditioning. It was exactly the kind of room I liked. Across from me sat Diana Frost, managing partner at Civex, one of the region's fastest-growing cybersecurity firms. Her handshake was firm, her gaze direct. "Ms. Calder," she said, "I've reviewed the documents 3 times. Everything checks out. Your system is extraordinary. Honestly, it's ahead of what most firms are doing right now." I smiled faintly. "It's supposed to be invisible, not extraordinary." She chuckled. "That's what makes it extraordinary." I nodded. "Then I think we understand each other." Beside her, an attorney from her legal team shuffled a small stack of papers. "If you're ready, we can finalize the merger." He said, "Civex will acquire a 51% stake, and you'll retain full creative and operational control." I signed the papers slowly, one by one. Each signature felt like closing a chapter, not a loss, just completion. When I finished, Diana leaned back in her chair. "Congratulations," she said. "You've built something rare. We're honored to protect it." "Protect it," I repeated. "That's the right word." We shook hands again. She slid a final envelope across the table. "Confirmation of transfer. The wire's already initiated," she said. "It should reflect in your account within the hour." I stood, gathering my folder. "Then I'll leave you to your next meeting. Take a breath first," she said. "You just closed a deal worth, what was it, 7.2 million? I gave a small smile. "Something like that," she grinned. "Enjoy it." "Ms. Calder, not everyone gets to walk away with both the money and their name intact." When I left the building, the afternoon light was pale and steady. I drove home with the windows half open, the wind carrying the faint scent of spring rain and asphalt. Back in my kitchen, I made tea the way I always did, 2 spoonfuls of honey, no milk. The laptop sat waiting on the table. Screen still asleep. I touched the trackpad and watched it flicker awake. The email from the bank was already there. Transfer confirmation. Incoming wire. I opened it. The numbers lined up neatly. Precise as always. Millions wired. Exactly as promised. For a long moment, I just looked at them. Then I closed the screen. The victory didn't roar. It exhaled, clean, quiet. A knock broke the silence. When I opened the door, Thomas Leary, my attorney, stood there, holding a thin folder. His expression softened when he saw me. "You didn't answer my messages," he said. "I've been busy," I replied. "Too busy to celebrate, I don't celebrate." I said, "I sign." He smiled. "That's what I admire about you." He stepped inside and set the folder on the counter. I wanted to drop off the official notice. "The merger's filed with the state. And there's something else." He hesitated before speaking again. Ava Lynn's legal team withdrew their complaint. I raised an eyebrow. Already, she didn't have much choice. He said, "Once the firm's investigation confirmed the breach, she lost any ground she thought she had. She'll recover," I said quietly. "Maybe," he said, "but it won't be in this industry." He paused. "You know, most people would be gloating right now. I'm not most people." He nodded. "That's true. Which is why I'll just say this. You earned every penny of that deal. No shortcuts, no tricks." When he left, I stood by the counter for a while, staring at the teacup, cooling beside the closed laptop. Ethan hadn't called again. The silence between us had stretched thin, but not broken. I wasn't sure if it ever would. Later that night, I sat on the porch, the glow from the street lamps falling across the empty road. I thought about the number in my account, the years it represented. The nights I'd worked while everyone else slept. For the first time, I felt the difference between pride and peace. Pride was what I used to crave the validation I thought would make me visible. Peace was quieter. It asked for nothing in return. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled low. I leaned back in my chair, listening, letting the sound settle into the dark. When the numbers finally balance, it doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like breathing again. And still, beneath that calm, there's something that lingers, an old debt that no ledger can erase. Weeks had passed since the deal closed. The house had settled into its familiar rhythm, again quiet, steady, mine. The only new thing was the porch light. I had replaced it a few days ago, a soft amber glow instead of the cold white one that used to hang there. It wasn't for guests anymore. It was for me. That evening, the sky carried the faded blue of late Carolina spring. I sat on the porch steps with a cup of tea, listening to the low hum of crickets beginning their song. For the first time in months, the silence didn't feel like waiting. It just felt like stillness. My phone buzzed against the railing beside me. I didn't reach for it right away. When I did, Ethan's name filled the screen. I saw the article. "I'm proud of you." I read the message twice. The article he meant had gone live that morning, a business journal piece about the merger. My work. The years behind it. The journalist had called me the quiet mind behind one of the most advanced forensic systems in modern finance. I hadn't wanted to be quoted, but they'd found my old photo anyway. The one from the faculty archives. I imagined Ethan reading it, realizing for the first time how much of my life had existed outside his understanding. The thought didn't hurt anymore. It just landed quietly, like something that had finally reached its right place. The phone buzzed again. "I mean it. Mom, you did something incredible. I'm sorry it took me this long to see it." I typed a few words, then deleted them. My fingers hovered over the screen before I finally set the phone down, face down beside me. Some things didn't need an answer. A light breeze moved through the yard, stirring the leaves. I glanced toward the lamp by the door, the new bulb shining steady and warm against the wooden porch. I remembered all the nights I used to leave the old one on, waiting for Ethan's car to turn the corner, waiting for something that never quite arrived. Now it burned for a different reason. The crickets grew louder as the last of the daylight drained from the sky. Somewhere far off, thunder rolled low and distant, the kind that promises rain but never quite delivers. I lifted my tea, took a slow sip, and looked at the glow spilling across the porch boards. "This one's for me," I whispered. I thought about the years I'd spent keeping the peace, about the nights when silence had felt safer than honesty. The ledger of my life wasn't about balance anymore, it was about release. The phone lit up once more with another text. I didn't open it. Instead, I stood, turned the porch light a little higher, and let its glow reach the street. In the distance, a car passed, headlights sweeping across the pavement before fading into the curve of the road. The world went quiet again, and the amber light stayed steady, soft but unflinching. It didn't signal waiting anymore. It marked arrival.